Lamar Jackson was hated on by some familiar faces, one who's known for it and one who's not. We talk about that, them getting blasted by their colleagues for it, Ravens draft drama heating up, and so much more coming up next on Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Oestreicher of Ravens Wire, here with you on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, thank you so much for being here, making Locked On Ravens a part of your day and your first listen each and every single day. Free and available all podcasting platforms, including video form on YouTube, where you can like and subscribe to the channel, as an audio form where you can follow along and subscribe as well. 5 days a week plus more of daily Ravens coverage for you here on Locked On Ravens. Today's episode of Locked On Ravens is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. Draft now coming up less than 3 weeks away, almost 2 weeks away. And on today's show, we're going to be diving into not only some draft drama for the Ravens heating up, but another mock draft Monday. So we're going to get into all of our draft content in the second and third parts of the show. On the first part of the show, though, there were some familiar faces who were talking about the Ravens and not expressing some confidence that Lamar Jackson could get the job done, one of which he's pretty known for it, the other one not so much. And then their colleagues on the other side blasted them about it. So we're going to talk about that in the first part of the show. The facility. We've talked about it a lot on Locked On Ravens. Emmanuel Acho obviously being the head man over there, the guy that we've talked about the most. That show obviously also includes LaShawn McCoy, Chase Daniel, and James Jones, all former players. The Ravens, the Bills, a bunch of AFC teams, they were the subject of a segment essentially called Rise or Slide. So they went through some of these teams and said, okay, are they going to rise or are they going to slide based off of the moves that they've made this offseason so far? The Ravens went first, and there were 3 rises and 1 slide. LaShawn McCoy, Emmanuel Acho, James Jones all said the Ravens would rise. Chase Daniel was the one that said the Ravens would slide. And Chase Daniel, when he talked about his reasoning, said, quote, "Look, I love Lamar. Lamar played the best ball he's ever played, and he didn't win the MVP. I just don't know if he can consistently play at that level. Remember, there was a stretch in there where they lost like 3 of their last 6 games. Getting to the championship game is hard." I understand getting to the championship game is hard. Actually, first of all, before we even get into that, the Ravens never lost 3 of their last 6 games. They never lost 3 games in a stretch over the course of the season. I mean, they started 0-2, yeah, but then they came back and they beat the Cowboys. Talking about the Ravens' last 6 games, the Ravens actually went 5-1 in their last 6 games of the regular season, where you have the win over the Chargers. They lost to the Eagles. So they went 1-1, and then the bye happened. But then they went 4-0 after the bye. So the Ravens went 5-1 over their last 6 games, not 3-3. That's a pretty big difference there. But look, I get the whole notion that, okay, yeah, getting the championship game is hard and this, that, and the other, and winning this, winning that. And so James Jones, when he talked about the reason why he said the Ravens were going to rise, he said, 2-time MVP Lamar Action Jackson. You don't know if he can play like that consistently, Chase. Rise, and they have to rise. From here on out until Lamar Jackson gets to that Super Bowl, it's going to be rise for me. They have to accomplish that. It is rise. They have the roster, and they have that man, number 8. And then Chase Daniel said, do you know how hard it is to win 13 games? And LaShawn McCoy says, he does it every year. He said he does it every year, which, you look at Lamar Jackson and the Ravens record over, the course of their, really, since Lamar Jackson came into the league, I'm not going to necessarily count. Lamar Jackson went, only had 1 loss when he came in for Joe Flacco over the course of the second part of his rookie season, because obviously Joe started that year. But then the Ravens, 14-2, 11-5, and then 2021 and 2022 was 8-9 and 10-7, but Lamar obviously didn't play the partially second halves of those 2 years, so I'm not necessarily going to count those all that much. But then 13-12. So yes, 13 games is not easy to win. I'm not saying it is. But across the league, Lamar Jackson, when he has been fully healthy, his worst season as a starter, where he has played, almost every game. And I say almost because sometimes he does rest, that like those last week of the season games. For the most part, I mean, look, 12, 13, 11, 14. He goes 6-1 as a starter in 2018. Those are all things that you have to take into consideration when talking about Lamar Jackson. So the thing that Chase is saying here, and I understand where he's coming from, but I also don't think that we should just say, oh, yes, we're going to pin all of this on Lamar. Lamar is the guy that makes the gears turn. But the point is that the Ravens do have the roster, like James Jones said. It's not just about Lamar. So Lamar played the best football we ever saw him play. That is absolutely correct. I agree with Chase Daniel on that point. But we also said that about him the previous season, and all of us were saying, oh, wow, well, Lamar, is this the best we're ever going to see Lamar play? This was the best Lamar's ever played. What does he have in store for next year? And what did Lamar do this past season? He played even better than that. So I'm not going to sit here and discount Lamar and say, oh, there's no way he can play better than 2024, because we said the same thing, or we were wondering, oh, what's Lamar going to have in store for 2024 after we just saw him play the best ball of his career in 2023. Then he went out there and, again, just absolutely annihilated his play from 2023. So, yes, Lamar's a special talent, and those talents tend to play. And I'm not saying, look, I said this after, if you've been listening to me on Locked On Ravens for, years since I started doing this show, from 2019 to 2020, what I had said about Lamar's first MVP versus where he was projected to go in 2020. I said that some of the numbers for Lamar will go up. I expect him to be more efficient. I expect him to do X, Y, Z, and whatnot. But to expect him to have just year after year after year of growth in terms of, let's say, passing yards, passing touchdowns, whatever it is, that is unrealistic. So while Lamar, again, the year that he had last year was incredible, broke multiple records, and again, the fact that he didn't win MVP and no award in general, there were a lot of deserving candidates. I think Lamar was certainly one of them, as I said on the show. But again, the fact that Lamar went out there and had 41 touchdowns to 4 interceptions, one of the best touchdown percentages in NFL history, right? If he continued to do that, by the time, he's 28 right now, by the time he was 33, he'd be throwing for 60, 70 touchdowns a season. It's not realistic to expect that. But I think that he can still play in the stratosphere. And if he, even if he doesn't play just a little, like if he's a little worse in 2025 than he was in 2024, that's still a heck of a season. And that is still more than enough to get the Ravens to where they want to go. Now, based off their additions, if I'm doing this rise or slide segment, I do think Baltimore's going to rise because, look, they had the list of free agents that Baltimore added and lost so far at this point. This ended up happening just under 2 weeks ago. I didn't even know about it till I was doing the show notes for today's show. But Patrick McCary, Malik Harrison, Brandon Stevens, Michael Pierce, they have Marcus Williams on this graphic as well. And the additions being Cooper Rush and DeAndre Hopkins. The Ravens have not made any big moves. I'm not going to classify DeAndre Hopkins as this massive move, or Chidobe Awuzie is now on the team. I'm not going to classify him as that either. But their losses don't really scream big losses to me. The one that will probably hurt the most is Michael Pierce. And now you have the draft coming up in about 2 weeks where you're retaining all of the players you needed to retain, essentially. Ronnie Stanley comes back. Patrick Ricard comes back. Tylan Wallace wasn't a must, but I think Tylan was a big re-signing for them. They didn't necessarily need Patrick McCary to come back. I don't think they wanted Brandon Stevens to come back, if I'm being honest with you. Malik Harrison, they're not going to really feel that loss, I don't think. It really is Michael Pierce here, and the offseason is not over, where, again, it's the draft and then the remainder of free agency where, the Ravens like to make some additions, a couple months out, a couple weeks out. Like, I still think that they are not done. Lamar Jackson, again, as I said, is the guy that makes all this go. He is the biggest piece of why and how the Ravens can get to a Super Bowl and win a Super Bowl. But to me, I think that the fact, and, Chase Daniel before asked, after Emmanuel Acho was done, why he said the Ravens are going to rise. Emmanuel Acho, who again is, he's been an interesting person when it comes to the conversations around Lamar Jackson. He talked about Zach Orr. He likes that, this, that, and the other. Second year for Zach Orr. And then Chase Daniel asked, well, how far, what does that rise look like? And Emmanuel Acho said, yeah, regular season success. We all know the story's out with the Ravens right now. I don't dispute that. I mean, it is the book. It's the Ravens have a great regular season. Then once the playoffs come around, they choke and they fold. That is the narrative around the Ravens. And I don't give anybody flack for believing that or saying that because it is true. But I don't think that is their story in terms of the future. Like, yes, they've had a lot of that happen in the past. It is the reason why they have not won a Super Bowl and why a lot of historic Ravens teams have not gotten the job done. It's been extremely frustrating, extremely disappointing. But I'm not going to box a team in because of that, where each team is different. Each year is different. Trends do remain, and it is concerning, the trend that we have seen. I'm not saying to completely ignore that because I don't think it's a talent issue with the Ravens. It's execution in the biggest moments. It's coaching in the biggest moments. In some way, somehow that rears its ugly head. But look, as long as the Ravens have Lamar Jackson, they will have a chance. And if the Ravens had a free agency loss year, it was bad, or, they were expecting to miss some guys due to injury, I'd expect, all right, maybe there's going to be a little slide there. But I still think the Ravens are the best team in the AFC North, and I still think that they should be considered as top contenders this season. So you have 3 of the 4 panelists saying that the Ravens are going to rise, one of them not. I do think Baltimore will rise, and honestly, I don't really care if it's regular season success. It's about making the championship game. Like Chase Daniel said, it's really hard to do that, and I agree. But if they don't, there are going to have to be some very serious conversations about what comes next and what happens next. Obviously, John Harbaugh being at the front of that conversation, but just how the Ravens look in general. But Lamar has put the Ravens have put themselves in position to compete in the playoffs. It hasn't gone that way. Their playoff success has been very disappointing over the last, really ever since Lamar was drafted, if we're being honest, because with 2019, 2023, and 2024, you would think at least one of those teams would result in at least one Super Bowl appearance, let alone a championship. And unfortunately, none of them did. Only one of them resulted in an AFC championship game, which is even more disappointing. So, look, I don't think it's fair to pin this on Lamar Jackson and saying, oh, well, if Lamar doesn't do this, Lamar's been carrying this team forever. And yes, it's his job as the quarterback, as the main guy to help propel the Ravens to where they need to go. But it's not all on Lamar because, as James Jones said, and I want to highlight this again, they have the roster. They have the roster. It's not just about Lamar. It's about Derrick Henry, Zay Flowers, Rashod Bateman, Mark Andrews, Isaiah Likely, the offensive line. You got the defense, which has all those stars on it too. Lamar is the guy, but he also has the guys around him to make it happen. So I think with Lamar, with that roster, like James Jones said, the Ravens are in position to rise. We'll come up with the second part of the show. We will talk about the Ravens draft drama heating up, who's visited with the team, what the positions of need are, and a lot more coming up on Locked On Ravens. First, this show is brought to you by TurboTax. This is a message from sponsoring TurboTax. Taxes was waiting and wondering and worrying if you were going to get any money back, then waiting, wondering, and worrying some more. Now, Taxes is matching with a TurboTax expert who can do your taxes as soon as today, an expert who gives your taxes their undivided attention as they work on your return, or you get real-time updates on their progress so you can focus on your day. An expert who will find you every deduction possible and file every form, every investment, everything with 100% accuracy. Also, you can get the most money back guaranteed. No waiting, no wondering, no worries. Now, this is Taxes. Get an expert now on TurboTax.com. Again, no waiting, no wondering, no worries. Now, this is Taxes. Get an expert now on TurboTax.com. Only available at TurboTax Live, full service, real-time updates only in iOS mobile app. See guarantee details at TurboTax.com/guarantees. Again, see details at TurboTax.com/guarantees. We're back. Our second segment, Locked On Ravens. Kevin Oestreicher here with you on this Monday, creeping up on 2 weeks before the draft begins. We have a lot to dive into when it comes to that. The Ravens' 11 draft picks. There's no secret that Derrick Acosta and this Ravens team loves to use those draft picks. And actually, I was doing a little look back on the Ravens draft picks since 2010. So let's do a little fun exercise quickly here at the beginning of this second segment. just go over those and talk about them briefly. You have no picks in 2010 and 2012, but you have Jimmy Smith in 2011, Matt Elam in 2013, CJ Mosley in 2014, Rashod Perriman 2015, Ronnie Stanley 2016, Marlon Humphrey 2017, Hayden Hurst and Lamar Jackson in 2018, Marquise Brown 2019, Patrick Queen 2020, Rashad Bateman and Lafayette 2021, Kyle Hamilton, Tyler Linderbaum 2022, Zay Flowers 2023, and Nate Wiggins 2024. I mean, out of all of these, you really only have 2.5 pure misses, I'll say. Matt Elam obviously being one, Rashod Perriman being the other, and then Hayden Hurst I'm counting as kind of a half because he had good moments, but, the whole trade thing, and he didn't really live up to expectations. But you have, absolute ballers on this list. Obviously, Lamar being the top one, right? But you look at 2022 to 2024, even 2021 to 2024, I don't even think Adafio is a miss. There are no misses from 2021 over the last 4 drafts. No misses with 6 first-round picks. That is extremely impressive. Obviously, Jimmy Smith was a long-time Raven. He was awesome. CJ Mosley had his time in Baltimore before going on to the Jets. Marlon Humphrey, Ronnie Stanley have both been awesome. There's a reason why the Ravens don't trade away their first-round picks as much as maybe, we clamor for them to do so, or, there might be a trade option available. It's because more often than not, look at the history, Baltimore does a great job of identifying talent in that first round and getting a guy or guys who can be 5, 10, even more than 10-year starters in a Ravens uniform. And that is so valuable, especially today when, you want to relate it back to Baltimore's situation. Baltimore needs those rookie contracts, those 4-year cheap deals, 5th-year option even though that's changed over the last handful of seasons. That's really, really important. Baltimore draft drama is heating up, though, because there are a lot of different people who want a lot of different things. And obviously, for the Ravens, they're going to try to field the best draft class possible. There will be hits, there will be misses. That is how it goes. But when it comes to who the Ravens are looking at, let's look at who they are looking at. Some visits so far, and this comes from NFLTradeRumors.co. There is, a comprehensive list of every NFL team, the visits that they have gone through. So for the Ravens, they've had, a bunch of visits here, but we'll just go over a few of them here. Smile Martin Jr. from Georgia, Shamar Turner from Texas A&M, Olufemi Odejo from UCLA, Charles Grant from William & Mary, Efton Chisholm, Eastern Washington wide receiver, Anthony Belton, NC State offensive tackle. Now, the pro days, private workouts they've been in attendance for and, have gone through Ty Felton, Maryland wide receiver, Carter Runyon, Towson, Nick Sowerton, Texas A&M, Marquis Collins, BYU corner, BJ Green, Colorado defensive end, Charles Grant, William & Mary, Caleb Etienne, BYU offensive tackle. Ravens have also had formal interviews at the Combine with Ashton Genty, Barrett Carter, Billy Bowman, Danny Stutzman, Mason Taylor, Emory Jones, Marcus Bowe, Jared Wilson, Josh Connolly, Sam Bowen, and then at the All-Star circuit, they have met with a couple of guys as well. First of all, I can probably say the Ravens aren't going to take Ashton Genty. That's my first inclination here. I think he's going to go far too early, and obviously with Derrick Henry there, Ravens don't need a running back currently. I could see some later round guys going to Baltimore here, like Billy Bowman is someone who has the ball skills. They could possibly go to Baltimore. Marcus Bowe, he's probably a second round guy that I could see if the Ravens take a defensive guy in the first round, maybe he could go. Josh Connolly is a guy that maybe the Ravens could trade up from 59 to get. That's a possible option. Some mid to later round wide receivers I could see happen here. But then you have some, Ty Felton being one. I think he'd be an awesome fit. I know a lot of people do want a Maryland wide receiver after Baltimore has passed on both Stephon Diggs and DJ Moore in recent seasons. But you look at some of the other guys. Shamar Turner is someone that everybody feels like has this super high upside potential. He has all the athletic traits. You can play him a bunch of places on the defensive line. The college production is not where you would want it for him. Kind of reminds me a bit of Odafe Owe in that route. Not that he had no sacks in college in his final year, because that was obviously Owe's situation. But I think if the Ravens want to go with high athletic upside and high traits upside, Shamar Turner would be a really solid option. And I think that he probably will be there at 27. I think that it's an option. But if they wanted to go with his teammate, Nick Scourton, that could also be another thing that they could probably go after here. But, Baltimore meeting with tight ends is also interesting. I've projected them in my mock draft to take one. I think that the Ravens will either roll with 4 this year, or they will take one in the 6th, 7th round, try to sneak them on the practice squad just to be an option for next season. Because, again, I think that Mark Andrews, and we talked about this with Sam Njoku on our Friday episode of last week, so be sure to check that out. But I just don't think that the Ravens will be able to bring back Mark Andrews and Isaiah Likely, and that to me is not really a hot take. So they're meeting and interviewing and, in attendance, seems like with a lot of the 2nd to 3rd round offensive linemen. So maybe that's where they're looking at here. Seems like it is more 1st round defensive players, particularly on the defensive line. But again, this doesn't tell the whole picture and the whole story, because obviously there are going to be some guys in the range of the Ravens that they could go with a bunch of different players at a bunch of different positions. I mean, you could honestly look at a couple of different options. Maybe you go with a cornerback or a safety or an edge guy or a D lineman or an offensive lineman. Like, there are so many different options for them here. And there are so many different people that want so many different things. And again, it's all going to really depend on just how the draft board plays out. Like, we're not going to know until the Ravens are on the clock and we've seen 26 other teams pick ahead of them who's actually going to be available. But in reality, Baltimore will have their board, and they will probably have 3 to 4 guys that they would feel comfortable enough taking at 27. Some they might like better than others, but that's just how it works. And if they have none of those guys left, the Ravens might probably look to trade back, or maybe someone falls in the early 20s and they want to trade up for somebody, which we'll get to in the final part of the show. So coming up in the final part of the show, we'll talk about my mock draft Sunday that I did for today, which did cause some controversy within the fan base. So be sure to stay tuned. We got a lot coming your way on Locked On Ravens. First, this show is brought to you by Monarch Money. Ever check your bank account and wonder where'd all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Now, Monarch Money is not just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place, so you stop just managing your money and start building wealth. Now, they have an all-in-one convenience, so instead of juggling multiple apps, you can actually use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, and even plan long-term goals. Plus, it's really easy to collaborate. Managing money with your partner is smoother than ever. You can track shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without the stress. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com. Code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year. One more time, use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com. Code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year. Back here, Locked On Ravens, Kevin Oestreicher here with you, talking Ravens football. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button in video form and audio form for 5 days a week of daily Ravens coverage. We've built up awesome communities here on the show, whether you listen to us in audio form, watch us in video form, you follow me on social media, KSRecord34 on Twitter, Instagram, you're on the subtext. There are so many amazing Locked On Ravens listeners and watchers and supporters, and I cannot thank everybody enough, whether you are an everyday or you listen each and every single day. If you're a first-time listener or somewhere in the middle, again, thank you. Now, we only have, including this one, 3 more Mock Draft Mondays, and we're going to get one out of the way today, where if you've been listening to me for years on this show, how we do it is, leading up to the last couple of weeks, we just do regular mock drafts, right? No trades, no nothing. This week, with 3 weeks out, almost 2, we're going to be doing the trade up scenario. And I posted this on social media yesterday, and it did get quite a bit of controversy when it came to how people took my trade up and my pick. So I'll just bring it up. We'll talk about it. I had the Ravens trading up from 27 to 23. Now, the trade that I made was with the Green Bay Packers, and I traded 27, 91, and 136 to move up to 23 to take Alabama guard Tyler Booker. Now, Booker's not the most athletic. In fact, he's one of the worst scoring offensive linemen in recent years based off of RAS scores. But he is one heck of a player. I think that he will have a phenomenal 10 to 12-year career. As you put him in a phone booth, you let him do his job. Now, if you don't think the scheme fit, is the greatest. I don't blame you. I mean, he's someone that, again, the Ravens like to have their guards pull. They like to have guys that can get out into space with their running scheme. And so for Tyler Booker, with his athleticism not necessarily being there, again, he ran a poor 40, had a pretty poor combine in general, kind of, I don't want to say tanked his draft stock, because I still think he is talented enough to go before the Ravens pick at 27. But I think that he's a guy that is not going to completely fit your scheme. And if you are fully into whoever needs to play in this system needs to fit the scheme perfectly, Tyler Booker probably not the guy. If you want to have a guy that's able to get out into space, be nimble and quick, that's just not necessarily a strength of Tyler Booker's game, especially when you watch the combine and, see everything that he had to offer there. He's not necessarily a guy that with his lateral movements is going to impress you, and his balance and body control, that's not going to impress you. So I understand. I get why it wasn't popular. Plus, I guess the positional value of trading up 4 spots, giving up your 3rd rounder and a 4th rounder to get a guard, where guard is not a premium position. You look at premium positions, we're excluding quarterback because that's in its own category, but wide receivers and corners and tackles are a premium position, not guards, but tackles are a premium position. Edge rushers are. Guard doesn't fall in that category. So I understand why people didn't love it, but I personally think that Booker is going to be a really, really, really good player. And look, you want really good players on your football team, and you kind of take the talent, figure out the rest later. I think the Ravens could make it work with Tyler Booker, but again, they might have to mask some of the athleticism issues that he has had, or that he does have. So that's what I did. I wanted to talk about it too, because what we do here on Locked On Ravens is we try to switch it up every week and have some differentiating mock drafts so we can talk about different scenarios. Round 2, I had the Ravens taking Azariah Thomas, the Florida State corner at 59, who I think, again, you don't have to have in a role right away, but I think that if he develops the right way, if there's a team that can develop him, he's going to be a star at the next level. And again, Nate Wiggins is going to be your guy at the corner 1 position long-term, right? Marlon is still there right now, but you want to get a guy who can be with him long-term. And I think that Thomas could be a really solid option there. Round 4, Jordan Phillips, Maryland defensive lineman. I think he's going to be a stud. I mean, I think Jordan Phillips is one of the more underrated defensive linemen in this class. And I'm not just saying that because he went to Maryland, I promise. Jack Sawyer at 176. I have no idea how he fell this far. Jack Sawyer is probably going on day 2. I don't know how he fell this far, but you know what? Let me say it one more time. If the mock draft simulator gives it to you, you take it. So we took Jack Sawyer at 176. Nice Peebles, Virginia Tech D lineman at 183. Another guy I think is super underrated, and I expect Baltimore to come out of this draft with 2 defensive linemen. Connor Colby, Iowa guard, who does have experience playing in a bunch of different positions. And again, Tyler Linderbaum will like the Iowa pick there. Caden Brather, the Maryland wide receiver at 210. Dante Trader Jr., I have it as Texas Tech here, but he is Maryland safety at 212. So whoops on that. But yes, Dante Trader, Maryland safety. And then Thomas Finone, the Nebraska tight end, is going to be at 243. I feel like Baltimore in this scenario, again, if you don't like the guard pick, I understand. But again, you round out this draft, I think, with positional needs. I get that there is a lot of questions when it comes to where the Ravens are going to go, how they're going to use their draft capital. Should they trade up? Should they not? 11 picks is a lot. I'm not sure they have 11 spots on the roster when it's all said and done. Does that mean you just cut losses with your assets? I mean, I don't know how that works. Plus, we know Baltimore's probably going to get a couple of undrafted free agents they really like as well. So those are all things you have to consider in these situations. But again, I think that it was a decently solid job by me here on this mock draft. But again, it's probably going to be skewed depending on how you feel about the guard position and how you feel about Tyler Booker in general. Let's get to a couple of listener/watcher mock drafts. First, I want to get one in from my guy, Chala, who has the Ravens taking Malachi Starks out of Georgia at pick 27. JT, Tuamilo, the edge from Ohio State at 59. Barrett Carter, Clemson linebacker at 91. Savion Williams, TCU wide receiver at 129. Logan Brown, Kansas offensive tackle at 136. Simeon Barrow, defensive lineman from Miami at 176. Kyle Mungai, the Rutgers running back at 183. Marcus Tate, Clemson guard at 203. Gain Brother, Maryland wide receiver at 210. Dante Trader, Maryland safety at 212. And Caleb Ransaw, corner from Tulane at 243. This late round, I mean, we got some of the same Maryland Terps going here to the Baltimore Ravens. But again, Malachi Starks would be awesome. He's my second-rated safety behind Nicky Minwari, and he's someone that is a ball hawk, great in run defense. He could really fit. Edge in the second round, I like that. Savion Williams is a big body wide receiver. I know a lot of people are talking about Jack Beck, but Savion Williams is a really nice wide receiver. So I think this, again, hits on a lot of the needs that the Ravens have. And you get them early and often here where you get the safety position, you get the edge. Now, there's no corner here. I feel like that probably I'd take a corner over maybe second wide receiver, or you try to find a spot in the early day 3 to get that corner. But overall, Malachi Starks, if he falls to Baltimore, I already consider that a win. Plus, you get some of the mid-round guys like a Savion Williams, who I do really like as well. And then let's get into one from E, who has the Ravens taking James Pierce at 27, Tennessee edge, Darian Porter, Iowa State corner at 59, Jackson Slater, guard from Sacramento State at 91, Joshua Farmer, DT from Florida State at 129, Jordan Phillips, DT from Maryland at 136, Miles Frazier, guard from LSU at 176, Jack Kaiser, linebacker from Notre Dame at 183, Caden Brother, Maryland wide receiver at 203, Za Frazier, corner from UTSA at 210, Tim Smith, DT from Alabama at 212, and Elijah Williams, Morgan State edge at 243. The thing with James Pierce, talented guy, off the charts. But the off-field stuff, I don't know if Baltimore is going to have him on their board. I'm not sure what it's going to look like. There's a chance he is. There's a chance he's not. I don't know. But from a football perspective, James Pierce fits a lot of what Baltimore needs, and he could be a game changer there. Corner, offensive guard, 2 DTs, more offensive line depth. I mean, this, again, you get most of your needs here. 2 corners as well. I think a safety would be at some point here. So maybe instead of the second or the third defensive lineman, I'd probably take a safety, maybe Billy Bowman or Dante Trader, one of those guys. But overall, hey, if the Ravens are sold, James Pierce can just, football, that's it, no off-field stuff, and that all goes away. I mean, whichever team gets him, whether that's Baltimore or somewhere else, probably getting a steal. Plus, you round out the rest of the draft with that depth that I was talking about. So I like this one a lot from E. But that's all I have for you here today on Locked On Ravens. Thank you so much for tuning into the show. Again, we'll be here for you 5 days because we always are on Locked On Ravens. So coming up tomorrow, we'll have more Ravens coverage for you. So be sure to hit the like and subscribe button in video form. Follow along in audio form as well. And I'll see you right back here tomorrow on Locked On Ravens.